The Panthers are stuck on the coaching carousel, and the faster they can get off in good standing, right, as comfortable as you can be, the faster they can find their coach, the better. The faster they can find their GM, the better. John Schneider of the Seattle Seahawks, their GM, held a press conference today. You know what he said? He said for the first time, right, because Pete Carroll's gone, the personnel decisions, I have final say. And do you know what I did? I got jealous. Because that's such an important thing to know going into the offseason. Who's making the decisions? Who's going to answer for their success and failure? Who has the final say? The Panthers have no gosh darn clue. Because in some situations, like when Pete Carroll was there, probably the head coach that has the final say. In some situations, the GM has the final say. In some twisted situations, the owner might have the final say. We hope that's not the case. Today is the first day the Panthers and others, not just the Panthers, they don't have some inside track, can virtually interview coaching candidates who are still in the playoffs and weren't on a bye last week. So, I mean, clock is ticking, right? Make your decision. Even if you can't formally hire somebody or offer somebody, it's nice to know, right? Hey, Ben Johnson, you're our guy. Who, by the way, he's interviewing with the Seahawks and others. Hey, this one, that one, you're our guy. Panthers have already interviewed the Ravens offensive and defensive coordinator, as well as their own defensive coordinator, Evero, who everybody's talked about, and their own interim head coach, Chris Tabor. They have requests into a bunch of others. Maybe some highlights. The offensive coordinator for the Dolphins, Frank Smith. The offensive coordinator for the Ravens, Todd Monken. The offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers. A lot of offensive coordinators.
Bengals, Brian Callahan.
Bengals, Brian Callahan. Texans, Bobby Slowick. They're all scheduled. Here's my official stance on where the Panthers are in their hiring situation. The only chance you wait, the only chance you are patient, is if you think there is a realistic shot at what I'm calling a whale. If that's the case, do everything you can to get that whale. That's where you use your advantages. Your advantages like David Tepper's wallet. That's where you use whatever you have to do. Now, who qualifies as a whale? The obvious. Mike Tomlin. If he's available, you figure it out. If you have to trade for him, you probably have to not do that because you don't have anything to trade.
That'd be a massive catch.
The other, I think Vrabel is that way.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have options. I think these are obviously defensive first guys who you break your plan for, right? Your plan is to get an offensive mind to grow with Bryce Young. Those types, you go, you know what, forget the plan. There's our new plan. Our new plan is that guy. That's something that can happen. But if you do that, just know, if you're waiting for them, just know you're taking a risk if those other guys want to start hopping off the carousel, or even if they are just buying and building relationships with other teams. I think Ben Johnson is becoming more and more of a pipe dream because he's the more success the Lions have, the more desirable he is by everybody else, and the less likely he is to quote-unquote settle for the Panthers.
He'll have all the options.
Because he's taken Jared Goff and completely rehabilitated him, and that reclamation project is looking like, one of those. I don't know if they're ever true. The HGTV shows where they're like, I bought this property for $40,000. I put a new paint and then some shutters, and now it's worth $600,000. I'm going like, is that really how this all works? He's doing that with Jared Goff right now. So maybe Ben Johnson becomes a pipe dream. I'm looking towards Bobby Slowick and going, if you don't get a whale, the offensive coordinator from the Texans looks mighty good to me right now.
And he has those ties with McVay and with Kyle Shanahan because they were on the same staff in Washington together, and Matt LaFleur, who's the head coach,
and Raheem Morris,
like all
and
those
Mike
guys.
McDaniel. They were all on that 2013 Mike Shanahan coaching staff in Washington.
Yeah,
all of them. I don't know what deals they made behind closed doors with whatever the powers that be, but they're all pretty good coaches.
They said they're all generally having success.
And Raheem Morris is in the mix for a lot of head coaching jobs. They could have another one. Mm-hmm. If Slowick and Raheem Morris become head coaches this offseason, well, that sound you hear is more Washington fans going, what the heck, which they're already doing. But if you're willing to be patient, just know that Ben Johnson might slip through your fingers, Bobby Slowick might slip through your fingers, and you might be settling for somebody like Frank Smith, the Dolphins offensive coordinator, who, by the way, the Dolphins offense is great, but let's not be foolish and say that Mike McDaniel doesn't have a lot to do with that. Right? What I like about Ben Johnson, what I like about Bobby Slowick, is you look at their head coaches, they don't strike me as the X's and O's behind the scenes driving forces of those offenses. D'Amico Ryans is a defensive-minded head coach. Dan Campbell is I don't even know, kneecap-biting head coach.
He's just a coach.
He's a former tight end, so he probably leans offense, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's like, no, we have to get to the counter to the double move later on in the game. He strikes me as someone who's looking at the offensive coordinator going, we have to strike with a fire and an intensity unlike anything you've seen before, something that is built for the motor industry in Detroit. Where's Eminem's Lose Yourself? Like that's what he's doing. So I'm just saying the risk and reward game for where they're going has to be considered, right? You want to keep your options open for a Tomlin, a Vrabel, if you're in the mood for a Belichick or a Harbaugh. Harbaugh did interview with the Chargers. If you're in the mood and you think you have a chance, you can wait out for those. But just know that as you're waiting those out, because those types of coaches are going to be in no hurry because they know they're going to have options. If you're waiting for those, the options that might be a bit more realistic for a team that I believe is dead last in attractiveness when it comes to openings, barring like a $20 million per year check from Tepper. The more realistic options may start sorting themselves out because the exact opposite is true, right? Mike Tomlin, heck, he could wait a year. He could go sit out a year. He could do the media thing. I think his son plays somewhere. He could go watch him for a year and know beyond a shadow of a doubt the next year, whole host of options.
He can pick where he wants.
The Slowicks of the world, they might feel like, okay, I better secure a job, a head coaching job while they're available. I'm not going to wait for anything, right? You offer me a job, I might just say yes, and guess who might offer them a job? The Raiders, the Chargers, all of these other teams that are open now. There's an urgency and a risk-reward in just taking your time if you're the Panthers. There is an urgency and a risk-reward that you have to weigh with every night you go to sleep not being pretty darn dead set on who your guy's going to be. Now, I understand there are some that are still playing, and you can't just come out and say, the Lions offensive coordinator, 5 days before they play in the playoffs, he is our head coach. You can't say that. So maybe we'll have a retroactive, right? The day after the Lions or the day after the Texans are eliminated, suddenly that announcement is made. Then I'll sit back and go, I apologize, Tepper, for this one very, very specific thing that I said because it may not have been true. All the other things, I stand by that, Tepper.
And here's the thing, Tepper, you're not only interviewing, you're recruiting a coach. That's the big thing. You got to sell it. You know, because it's one thing if you're like Atlanta or heck Washington or the Chargers or something like that, where it's everyone's intrigued by it most likely. Whereas Carolina, because you said there are tons of question marks about the franchise and what they have to offer in the near future and down the line. You got to recruit. Like you got to sell someone on this thing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and you have to give them the time they need.
Yeah.
Because if I'm an offensive-minded head coach and I may be aware of Bryce Young, maybe did some pre-draft stuff, before I accept the job, I want to go back and watch. Give me 24 hours, and I'm living in my basement that 24 hours watching Bryce Young tape. I might even want to talk with Bryce Young or go talk to Nick Saban, right? I may want to go find some co-signers on that before I hitch my wagon to that quarterback.